Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, the podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Meslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Carrie Brown is the author of 5 keto cookbooks, an ex-professional pastry chef, including Baking for the Queen, co-host of the 2 Keto Dudes podcasts, as well as the Sugar-Free Journey podcast, and a mental health warrior. Carrie is one of the most lovely, kind, and secretly brilliant people I've met, and exemplifies the best parts of the keto community. Thanks for joining today, Carrie.
Hey, Scott. I'm not sure about secretly brilliant, but you're very kind.
Well, really glad to have you on. We've been trying to make this happen for a while. It was so nice meeting you at the Carnivore Conference in Denver, briefly, and really happy to introduce you to the Carnivore Cast.
Yeah, it was, that was a fortuitous meeting with our joint friend, Mr. Danny Vega. Such a good networker, that boy. So yeah. I was thrilled that we were able to meet, and it was my fault that it's taken us several months to get this actually done, but we're here now, so
no worries. Yeah. So maybe, Carrie, we can just start, if you don't mind, telling listeners who may not be familiar with your story and your background a little bit about yourself, and then maybe getting into your mental health journey and where that started.
So how I got where I am now in the keto space is twofold. One, I am a trained pastry chef. So I'm a pastry chef. I'm a pastry chef by trade. I trained at the National Bakery School in London, which is part of South Bank University. And so ironically enough, now I do absolutely nothing with anything that regular pastry chefs use because, of course, keto. But that's how I started on the kind of the whole food part of keto. Was I took that professional pastry chef knowledge and am now applying it to creating recipes that will help people stay on the ketogenic lifestyle. A lot of people find it very, very difficult. And I think it would be made even more difficult if the food they were eating wasn't delicious. It doesn't matter how much they know that they need to do it for their health. Most people are not going to stay the course if the food they're eating is not enjoyable or not tasty to them. So that's kind of the hole I fill in that regard. But the other reason that I came into the keto space was, you alluded to earlier, was the fact that I am a mental health warrior. And that's because I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder. And that started me down a journey to seeing if I could discover why I was bipolar and see if there was anything I could do to stop being bipolar. And so the very short version of that story is that I have been completely unmedicated for coming up for 4 years, and I've been completely symptom-free as well. So the large part of why I do what I do is not only because I have the practical skills in helping people to cook delicious keto food, but my bigger mission is reaching out to as many people who suffer from mental health issues and seeing if I can't inspire them with my story of healing and also encourage them to embark on their own detective journey as to why they have the mental health issues that they can do and see if they can solve them.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And I think it's a story that's not told enough in the keto space, the mental health side. And one thing that I think leads to that is it's harder to express the mental benefits of keto to people versus weight loss, which is so easy to present physically in a before and after, transformation photo. How do you think about starting to convey that to people and like express to them the difference in quality of life that it has brought you and can bring others in a digestible way?
I think the thing that makes it much harder to talk about is that it is still a very, very taboo subject. It's not socially acceptable to have any kind of mental health issues. It's not safe to talk about it out loud, either because of family members or friends or employers. It should be okay to say, I have bipolar 2 disorder or whatever your mental health issue, the same way as saying I have type 2 diabetes or I fell down and broke my leg. But the reality is that there's a lot of fear and judgment out there, and it's simply not safe for a lot of people to talk out loud about their mental health issues, which makes it very, very difficult. Because nobody's talking about it, it makes it very difficult. And, people feel very isolated and very alone because no one's talking about it. So I kind of took it upon myself. I've passed the point of caring what other people think of me. So I've taken it upon myself to talk about it proudly and loudly at any opportunity I get, in the hope that someone listening will have the courage to start their own journey to healing, or will reach out to me so that I can give them some pointers, or will be brave enough to talk to their doctor or whoever else and start down that path to see if they can't bring about the kind of changes that I was able to bring about in mine.
Yeah, that's awesome. And if you don't mind, Carrie, can you talk a little bit about, what you had been through, what you had tried, and just how bad, your depression had become before you were able to find keto, and what kind of finding keto was like for you?
So I was actually born depressed. It's a clinical depression. It wasn't what I would call a situational depression where something had happened to make me sad or depressed. It was the kind of depression that has no apparent rhyme or reason. I grew up in southern England in a middle class family. We weren't wealthy by any means, but I had a roof over my head and I had clothes and food, and my parents didn't beat me, and so I didn't have anything to be depressed about, and yet that was all I'd ever known. So at a very young age, I knew there was something different about me, and it came across to me from other people that there was something wrong with me, and I grew up feeling not good enough and failed. And despite all the things I tried to do, and despite not really understanding what it was I was doing wrong, it meant that by the time I was in my late teens, I was pretty much just resigned that I was broken and I wasn't fixable, and I was just going to have to kind of, get through life as best I could under this never-ending black cloud of depression that I didn't want and didn't understand. So once I reached my late teens and I actually left home, I started some therapy because I assumed that would help. And over the years, I went in and out of therapy, and I went on and off of various antidepressant medications to see if any of them would help. And although talk therapy was useful to a point, it never made the depression go away. And none of the medications helped, which is why I came on and off them. I would stay off them until I became desperate, and then I would go on them in the vague hope that something would shift, but it never did. And it got to the point where as a young adult, I just reached the point where it was a case of, this is my life, this is just me, I'm broken, I can't be fixed, and I'm just going to have to learn how to put on a game face and tell the world what it wants to hear and put out what the world wants to see, just so that I can survive this without creating any more drama. So that's what I did. I learned to fake it and be outwardly happy and all of the good things. And then, I would go home, and when I was on my own, the depression would just be crushing.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly difficult, and I can only imagine what that feels like, affecting you for your whole life. And how did you come upon this style of eating, and what were your first experiences with it altering your mental state?
Well, it all came to a head. And so up until that point, I'd been diagnosed with just depression, unilateral depression. And it came to a head 6 years ago in 2013 when I actually had a complete mental break. And I ended up in the hospital. And I was very, very almost committed, which I was living in Washington at the time, and in Washington state, it's illegal to commit suicide. So the fact that I had expressed an intention to do so meant that the law enforcement could put a stop to that. So I ended up in the ER under armed guard. I very almost got committed, but I managed to talk them out of committing me on a promise that I would do certain things, one of which was have a psychiatric evaluation. And as a result of 2 psychiatric evaluations, I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder, at which point there was a team of psychiatrists and psychotherapists and doctors who were between them trying to figure out what medication to give me to keep me stable. And the first one they put me on, I remember, I became a zombie. I could barely function. So I did that for 2 weeks, and that clearly didn't work because I had to support myself and go to work. After, I think it was about on the 4th medication, they got me to the point where I was stable enough where I could function. However, 9 months after my initial mental break, I became suicidal again despite the medication. And I was suicidal for 8 months straight, which was probably the most exhausting time of my life.
Wow.
I still had to go to work because no one else was going to pay the bills, and incredibly difficult. At the end of that 8 months, I decided to go see a new doctor because clearly what was happening wasn't working. And he asked me to try a different drug called lamotrigine. The name of that is important. I'll tell you why in a minute. So he put me on lamotrigine. I stopped everything else. And within 3 days, it was like someone switched the lights on. So for the first time in my life, I felt joy. And I had a pretty joyous time for about 6 months. And then after 6 months, I became suicidal again. And their response to that was to double the dose. So we doubled the dose and the joy returned. And about 6 months later, I became suicidal again. And their response to that was to double the dose.
Wow.
And that was the point at which I said, I'm calling BS. Nobody is asking the critical question except me. Now, in my mind, the critical question was, why does Carrie have bipolar?
Yeah.
Not what Band-Aid can we give you to stop the symptoms, but why does Carrie have bipolar? Because in my mind, if we could figure out why I had it, then we had a chance of making it go away.
Right.
And so the third time they tried to double the dose, I said no, and I fired everybody on my entire team. And I said, I'm going to find out why I have bipolar. And of course, there were a lot of eye rolling and, that kind of response. But I decided that it had to be one of, or a combination of, genetics or environment, toxins, food. There had to be some reason that my system worked the way it did. So the first thing I did was I sent off for my DNA and got my complete genome back. And around the same time, I also bumped into the infamous Dr. Ted Naiman on Twitter. And we started up a conversation. And then he agreed to write a foreword for my then fourth keto low carb cookbook.
Oh, nice.
And as a result of that, I said, hey, we wrote a book, we should probably meet. And so it turns out that his office was 11 miles from my home in Seattle. So we got together and we were talking about my bipolar. And he said, I think I can help you. So I made an appointment at his office and I went to see him. And he was the one that actually put me on the full hardcore medical level ketogenic diet. And his reasoning was because the drug that they had me on that had worked, lamotrigine, is actually a seizure medication. An anti-seizure medication. Now, the ketogenic diet was originally developed to help children with seizures. And it was very, very successful in either reducing or eliminating seizures in children. His thinking was, since I was on an anti-seizure medication that had been helpful, maybe putting me on a ketogenic diet would also be helpful in the same way that it was helpful to children who have seizures. So Ted put me on a ketogenic diet. And then while that was happening, I was also having a whole bunch of food sensitivity tests and toxin tests and all of the rest of it. And I took all of that and the DNA results to a naturopath. And we figured out some pretty cool stuff. The DNA showed that I have a genetic mutation called MTHFR, which more and more people are hearing about now. They estimate that about a third of the population have this genetic mutation. One of the things that MTHFR does is that it either reduces or stops your ability to methylate. Now, methylation is a very important process. There's a lot of processes in the body that require methylation. And those of us who have the MTHFR mutation have a reduced ability to methylate. Well, here's why that's very important for mental health, is that one of the things that the body is required to methylate is B vitamins. So when we take in B vitamins in any form, supplements or the food we eat, they can't be used until they have been methylated by our body. Now, I can't methylate. So I had basically had a lifelong serious deficiency in B vitamins. And why that is important is because the number one role of B vitamins in the body is neurotransmitter health. So basically my neurotransmitters had been starved of the nutrients they needed for my whole life because I don't have the ability to methylate B vitamins as they need to be. We also found that my serotonin and dopamine receptors were broken in about 40 different places. We also found that I am intolerant to gluten, although I'm not celiac. I do have a genetic red flag which says that I'm intolerant to gluten. So, and there also people who can't methylate have a very hard time removing toxins. Our livers don't detoxify in the same way as everyone else. So if you add all those factors up, it's really no surprise that at some point my brain was going to go sideways. In my case, it showed up looking like bipolar 2 disorder.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And it must have been both a relief and kind of crazy to find out that the MTHFR gene was the methylation problem was a big cause of everything you had gone through. Was that a relief for you or
it was
frustrating?
It was the biggest relief because, well, if you know what something is, if you can put a name to it, if there's something you can hang your hat on, then there's a chance that you can fix it. If you don't know what the problem is, there's nothing you can do about it. So knowing that there was something I could work at fixing, knowing that there are companies that pre-methylate B vitamins so that I could take them in a form that I could use, was just huge. But from a mental health perspective, I think it was like the best day of my life to find out that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't broken. Well, I was broken, but it wasn't in the way I'd been led to believe my whole life. To know that I wasn't crazy and that my behavior as in the form of symptoms of bipolar wasn't my fault was the most relieving, liberating thing ever. It changed my whole perception of myself to know that I wasn't just this crazy person who couldn't control their emotions or fell into these massive depressions that I couldn't do nothing about. That was no longer my fault. It was like you might, wake up and suddenly you can't put any weight on your left leg and you can't walk anymore, and you go to the hospital and you find out your leg's broken, right? It was kind of the similar thing, was that, well, I'm not broken. This is not my fault. It's just, it's like having diabetes of the brain. It's not me. Did that make sense?
It's not a character flaw. It was just a nutritional deficiency and a biochemical process.
Right. That changed everything. Absolutely changed my view of myself, the feelings of hopelessness. It wasn't my fault, and that changed everything. So between the methylated B vitamins, eliminating food sensitivities, and following a ketogenic diet, which of course was bathing my brain in these super healthy ketones, has eliminated all of my symptoms of bipolar 2 disorder for the last, it'll be nearly 4 years in October, which has been literally miraculous for me.
That is miraculous. And Carrie, I'm going to steal a question from you that I love when you ask on Two Keto Dudes, which is, how do you keto?
So that's a good question, because it's, and it's a good question because I have learned over the last 4 years that none of us, it's not static with any of us. So we eat a certain way, and then our bodies start to heal, and then we may have to tweak it. So there's a lot of people who, are very overweight, come to keto, eat keto with a certain ratio of proteins to fat, lose a ton of weight, and then one day they just stop losing. So they then have to tweak what they're doing because their body is healed to some extent, and it's different, and their ratios are different, and so you actually have to tweak. So that's an interesting question because it hasn't looked the same for the 4 years, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's the same for me.
So right now I've just started fasting. I've wanted to fast for a long time, but because of my fear of not taking my B vitamins, and I have to take them in the morning, and if I don't take them with food, then I get incredibly nauseous, or I toss them all back up, which seems counterproductive.
Yeah.
So I've always kind of had it in my mind, well, then I can't fast because I have to take my supplements, and so I never have. But due to a recent illness, I suddenly have started fasting and found that it was way easier than I thought. And so now I did a 48-hour fast, and then I went to carnivore OMAD, 1 meal a day, if you're not familiar with that term.
Yeah.
And so I did that for 2 weeks, and now I've moved to, I guess, what would be pretty much carnivore 2 meals a day, but with a 6-hour eating window. So I will eat between the hours of 2 p.m. and 8 p.m. and at no other time. But instead I was doing OMAD, but now I'm doing 2 meals a day within a 6-hour window.
Oh, that's interesting. And I know in the past you had said carnivore wasn't exactly for you. What's made you kind of change your mind around on that?
So it was enforced. I had my mind changed, and I don't know if you listened to the recent 2 Keto Dudes episode, but so I'll skip the TMI, but I basically got a bug of some sort.
Ah, got it.
And was very effectively had my system cleaned out. Mm-hmm. And did a 48-hour fast because I didn't want the consequences of eating. And that after that 48-hour fast, I continued to have these symptoms. We didn't know what was causing it, but I continued to have these symptoms that required me staying at the house. Let's put it that way.
Got it.
And so I went to carnivore OMAD 1 meal a day because I only wanted to see the symptoms once a day, not multiple times a day. And I went carnivore because I was just trying to keep the ingredients, the number of foods I was eating. I was trying to keep everything super pure and super things that would not irritate my gut. So that's kind of how I went to carnivore 1 meal a day. And as I say, now I've gone to mostly carnivore 2 meals a day in a 6-hour window. So between 2 and 8 is what I eat. And I kind of copied that. I pinged Dr. Naiman and said, what do you think? And he said, that's kind of pretty much what he does. Not that I'm anything like Ted Naiman, but he has a 4 to 6 hour eating window. He eats most of his calories at night.
Right.
So that's what I'm trying now. And the reason I'm carnivore right now is because I'm being super, super, super careful that I don't give my gut any reason to continue doing what it was doing up until a couple of days ago. Yeah. Until we find out what the issue was. I've got tests in with the lab right now.
Okay. Well, I hope you recover shortly and hope that all sorts itself out and you can include some of those foods you enjoy. But glad to hear it's working.
Yeah, I do miss my greens. I do generally feel better when I have some level of veggies. So it's extenuating circumstances that what I'm eating now does not look like normal. However, I must admit this time around, carnivore with the fasting, I have actually been feeling really, really good. So, all I can put it down to is that our bodies are continually changing, and I think it's a really good idea to keep tweaking as things change. Find what the right thing for you right now is. And our friend Danny Vega is like the total expert at like tweaking and experimenting and adding this and taking out that and organ meats and I've lost track of where he is now, but he's forever trying to optimize his diet depending on what his goals are right now and how he feels right now. And I think that's good. That's a good rule of thumb for all of us to never think that we've reached a state where we can just keep doing the same thing for the rest of our lives. I don't think that's a thing.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Always keep experimenting and testing. And Carrie, what do you like to bake now that you're so focused on keto? I mean, folks should definitely go check out your cookbooks, but what are some of your favorite things to bake? For others, I know you have Keto Fest and mini fests, which maybe you can explain what those are for folks too. But what are some of your favorite things to bake?
So I am, and this is like the irony is not lost on me that I'm a pastry chef, and yet the thing I do least now in the keto space is bake. But the reasons for that is that, keto versions of pastries and breads and keto versions of garbage is not what we should be focused on, even though they're keto. I don't think most people are best served by focusing on things that have sweeteners or things that have massive quantities of nuts or perhaps even massive quantities of dairy. So baking, although that's my thing, it is not my thing anymore in the keto space. I believe that what people really need is everyday food, is just, you know, dinners and lunches, just meals. The treats are great, but they should be treats. They shouldn't be what we're focused on doing. So I focus on creating the soups and the stews and the crock pots and the meals that we can eat all the time. That's not to say I don't do desserts. I do some desserts, and that's still my favorite thing to do because I don't know, I love the precision. I love making things look really special. I love that. But because I don't think that is what best serves most people on a ketogenic diet, I don't spend most of my time doing that. The one thing I do is ice cream. So ice cream is probably my favorite ever thing to make. And I was an ice cream aficionado, making ice cream aficionado before low carb and keto. And so I've just brought that ice cream knowledge and ice cream passion into the keto world. So actually my first cookbook was the Keto Ice Cream Scoop, which has over 50 different keto ice cream recipes and about 20 or so mix-ins. So there's a ton of really, really cool ice cream recipes that you would be hard pushed to tell the difference between them and Haagen-Dazs or Ben & Jerry's.
Yeah, I know my fiance is very excited to try those at Keto Fest.
And I'm actually, you'll be coming to the VIP party, and I'm actually making Caffeination Station keto ice cream and Kept in the Dark chocolate ice cream for the VIP party. So you will be able to try them there. But the book has some really exciting flavors in it. So if ice cream is something that you miss on keto, you do not have to miss it anymore.
That's great. And can you talk a little bit about, just for my listeners who may be less familiar, what is Two Keto Dudes, what is Keto Fest, and what are the Keto Mini Fests?
So Two Keto Dudes got together, Carl Franklin and Richard Morris got together. They met in the software development space. They're both geeky, computery people. And Richard was kind of mentoring Carl in there. They were both type 2 diabetics. They both were very overweight. And so they started helping each other on this low-carb journey. And as a result of that, they started the first keto podcast. Carl has been podcasting since the internet began, but his topic was software development, at which he's a whiz. But when he met Richard and they started on their own personal keto journeys to see if they could rid themselves of type 2 diabetes, they decided to start a podcast really as a way to chronicle their journey into the keto and the science and the changes that it brought about for them. So that's how it started. It's the longest running keto podcast there is. They have, we have a monthly download of about 275,000 unique downloads a month. So it's very well listened to. So then about 6 months ago, Richard is actually studying for a PhD. He's going to be Dr. Morris, and he just found that he didn't have the bandwidth to continue all the work he was doing for Two Keto Dudes while he was studying and doing all these other endeavors and the research. So Carl reached out to me at the end of last year and said, we would love you to be the new dude or the dudette. So I stepped into, well, actually, I didn't step into Richard's shoes because nobody can fill Richard's shoes. So I just came in with my own brand of keto, and we talk about, mental health. That's my thing. And of course, the cooking, I bring that skill too. So that's what Two Keto Dudes is. It started with the podcast. Then because I moved about 6 months before Carl reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to be the new co-host, I actually moved to Connecticut, and I live about half an hour away from Carl. So that was kind of fortuitous. So what Carl does usually once a month, he holds what he calls a mini fest, where people can purchase tickets and they go over to his home in New London, Connecticut, and Carl prepares a full keto meal. Now I'm here. I've started showing up with keto desserts, and then we will have a guest speaker. So we've had people like Eric Westman, we've had Nina Teitzold, we've had the who's who of keto, who will either come in person or Skype in and talk to people and do a Q&A. So it's very it's informative, but it's also networking. It's good food. It's just like a little mini conference, usually on a Saturday night.
Yeah, I love how you guys are doing such an excellent job between the podcast, the festivals, the mini fest, and the forum of creating this awesome community around keto. And I think that's why Two Keto Dudes has been so successful and created such a strong following, and so many people really resonate with it, is that strong community aspect, whether it's your personality, Carl's, and also bringing forth the science and these great experts, but making everyone feel connected, which is so important when you're kind of going out on a limb with this different way of eating.
And then Keto Fest is once a year. New London, the town, goes keto for the weekend, for a long weekend. And we will be doing demos. Carl, Richard, and I, and a bunch of other people will be doing cooking demos. We'll be recording podcasts live on stage. And we also have a whole pile of awesome keto folks like Ken Berry, Dr. Peter Ballastad, Siobhan Huggins. I'm trying to think, Amber O'Hearn, a lot of the really big names in keto come and speak at Science Sunday. And then, of course, there's all the social stuff. There's a lot of different ways that people can network with each other, build more community, have fun with people who are like-minded. It's really, really great weekend.
Yeah, I can't wait. Really looking forward to it. And Carrie, this has been so much fun. Really appreciate you coming on, and I think folks will get a ton of value out of this, hearing your story, and just understanding more around how keto evolves, keto for mental health, and all these different aspects which you speak about so intelligently. Where can people find out more about you, and what are some things that you're looking forward to in the future that people can expect?
So the easiest place to find me is to go to carriebrown.com, CarrieBrown, carriebrown.com. And if you go to there's a tab in the top left-hand corner which says where to find me, and that page lists where I am and gives you links to everywhere I am on social media, YouTube. If you do want to hear more about a more graphic version of my journey through bipolar, I spoke at KetoCon in Austin last year, 2018. That is, if you or someone you know is suffering from mental health, that might be useful for you. All the other places where I'm active are there. Right now, the exciting thing is I am I've created an 8-week program with a wonderful keto coach called Kim Howerton. I don't know if you've met her yet. You'll meet her at Keto Fest.
Yep.
We've created an 8-week program to help people get unstalled or get on track or get back on track or get started if they're new. So that's an 8-week program that has been super, super well received. People are loving it. They're getting great results. So that's kind of what our focus has been this year. But I do have more recipes coming soon and also 2 new podcasts coming soon. So there's always more to do and always more people to help. And I'm just super excited about doing what I can to move that forward.
Awesome. I can't wait for those, and be happy to help share them when those come out with my audience and my followers as well.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on today again, Carrie. Really appreciate it.
I'm very grateful for the opportunity. I hope that if we've only helped one person who's struggling with mental health problems to find a new path, then that would be awesome.
I'm sure we will. Thank you, Carrie. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered? Or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Carnivore Cast, or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.